This is Concept E classes, and today we'll deal with chapter 1 of class 9 NCERT Science, Matter in our Surroundings. So first we'll see what is matter, what is the physical nature of matter, and we'll study that matter are made up of small particles, so we'll understand more about the characteristics of these particles, and then we'll see states of matter, and then the interconversion of the states of matter, how the matter changes from one state to another, and finally we deal with evaporation. So let's begin the chapter. What is matter? So matter is anything that occupies space and has mass. If you look at our surroundings, we see a large variety of things with different shapes, size and textures. Say for example, the air we breathe, the food we eat, the stones, the clouds, stars, living organisms like plants and animals, even a small drop of water or a particle of sand. Everything occupies a certain space and has a certain mass. So these all are matter. So everything in this universe is made up of matter. Now humans have been trying to understand the surroundings for a very long time. The early Indian philosophers, they classified matter in the form of 5 basic elements. The Panch Tattva: air, earth, fire, sky and water. So according to them, everything, both the living and the non-living things, was made up of these 5 basic elements. And the ancient Greek philosophers also had arrived at a similar classification of matter. Whereas according to the modern day scientists, matter can be classified based on their physical properties and chemical nature. Now what are physical properties? Those are the properties that is measurable without changing its composition or the nature of that material. Say for example, a color, appearance, texture, density, volume, etc. Whereas chemical property is any of that material's property that is seen during or after a chemical reaction. For example, toxicity, flammability, acidity, etc. So we'll study more about this chemical property in the following chapters, and in this chapter we'll see the physical properties of matter. Physical properties of matter. So during a long time, the people had a confusion regarding the nature of matter. Some people believed that matter was continuous in nature, like a block of wood, whereas some people believed that the matter was made up of particles, like that of sand. So is matter particulate or continuous? Matter is actually made up of particles. So let's understand this through a simple activity. Take a 100 ml beaker. Now fill half the beaker with water and mark the level of water. Now dissolve some salt or sugar with the help of a glass rod. Now observe any change in the water level. What do you think has happened to the salt? And where did the salt disappear? And does the level of water change? No, the water level didn't change. Actually, when we dissolve the salt in water, the particles of the salt get into the spaces between the particle of water. So here we can see, if this is the water and the dark blue shows the salt, here we can see that the particles of the salt, it get into the spaces between the particles of water. So from this we can understand that matter is made up of particles. Now how small are these particles of matter? So to understand that, let's consider another activity. Take about 2 to 3 crystals of potassium permanganate and dissolve them in 100 ml of water. Now take out 10 ml of the solution and put them in a 90 ml of clear water. Now take out 10 ml of this solution and put it into another 90 ml of clear water. Keep diluting the solution like this about 5 to 8 times. Is the water still colored? Yes, we will see that the water still has a purple color. So this experiment shows that just a few crystals of potassium permanganate can change a large volume of water, or 1000 liters of water. So we can conclude that there must be a millions of tiny particles in just one crystal of potassium permanganate which keep on dividing themselves into smaller and smaller particles. Hence, the particles of matter are very small. They're small beyond our imagination. So let's see some of the characteristics of the particles of matter. So we studied that matter is made up of particles and the particles of matter are very small. So now let's understand some of the characteristics of these particles. The particles of matter, they have space between them. In our previous experiment, when we mixed the particles of sugar or salt or potassium permanganate with water, we saw that it got evenly distributed with water. So what happened here is that the particles of one type of matter, say for example the particles of salt, it get into the spaces between the particles of water. So this shows that there is enough space between the particles of matter. So just now we saw how the particles of the salt, it got into the spaces between the particles of water. So we can say that the particles move from one place to another. So another characteristic of the particles of matter is that they are continuously moving. Let's understand this through three other activities. First activity is that put an unlit incense stick in a corner of the room. Now how close do you have to go near to it so as to get its smell? Now lit the incense stick, what happens? Do you get the smell sitting at a distance? Yes, we are able to smell the incense stick. That is because the gas particles from the stick have reached our nose. So from this we can understand that the particles are moving. Now we'll consider another activity. Take two glasses filled with water and another with honey. Now put a drop of blue or red ink slowly along the sides of the beaker and honey in the same way in the second beaker. Now let them be undisturbed in a corner of the room. What can be observed after a few days? We can see that this beaker will turn blue in color or red in color. That is because the ink particles, they have reached the different parts of the beaker. Here also, after dropping the honey, we can see that the particles start dissolving and the water will turn slight yellowish in color. But the diffusion of honey is a bit slow when compared to that of ink. That is because the density of honey is quite higher, whereas ink is made up of very small particles and it easily occupies the space between them. So here also we can understand the particles are moving. Now let's consider the last activity. Here we drop a crystal of copper sulfate or a potassium permanganate into a glass of hot water and a glass of cold water. Do not stir the solution. Allow the crystals to settle at the bottom of the beaker. What can you see? We can see that the whole water will turn purple. This is because the particles of potassium, they are able to move in the glass. And in the case of hot water, the diffusion or the water is the potassium permanganate dissolves very quickly in the water when compared to the cold water. Hence, from these activities, we can conclude that the particles of matter, they are continuously moving. That is, they possess a kinetic energy. Now, what is kinetic energy? It is a property of a moving object, or it is the energy of an object due to its motion. Okay. So, as the temperature increases, the particles also move faster. In the previous experiment, we saw how we put a potassium permanganate in hot water and cold water. So when the temperature increases, the particles, they move faster. They dissolve very quickly. So we can say that the increase in temperature, the kinetic energy of the particle also increases. We can also observe that the particles of the matter, they intermix with each other. That is by getting into the spaces between the particles. We saw this, right? How the particles of one matter, it intermix on their own with each other. So this intermixing of particles of two different types of matter on their own is called as diffusion. The intermixing of particles of two different types of matter on their own is called as diffusion. And we also observe that on heating, the diffusion becomes faster. So this is all what we have observed through these experiments. So we can say that the particles are continuously moving. The next characteristic is that the particles of matter, they attract each other. That is, there is a force of attraction between the particles of matter. So let's consider an activity to understand this more. Take an iron nail or a piece of chalk and try breaking them by hammering or cutting. In which of these substances do you think that the particles are held together with a greater force? We can see that it is easy to break a chalk with a hammer, but it's not quite easy in the case of an iron nail. Hence, the force of attraction between the particles in an iron nail is higher than that of a chalk. Let's consider another activity. Try some water in a container and try cutting the surface of the water with your fingers. Or try cutting a flowing water from a tap. Are you able to do so? No, it is not possible. It is because the force of attraction of particles in water is quite high. But if you try waving or cutting through air, we are able to do so. Hence, the force of attraction of particles in air is very less. So from all these activities, we can understand that the particles of matter, they have a force acting between them. And this force keeps the particle together. So this is actually the image of the particles in solid, liquid and gas. The force of attraction in solids is higher, it's much less in liquid, and it is least in gas. Now the strength of this force of attraction, it varies from one kind of matter to another. See, from this we can understand. Now let's understand the states of matter. So if we observe the different types of matter around us, we can say that the matter exists in three different states: solid, liquid and gas. Now these states of matter, they arise due to the variation in the characteristics of the particles of matter. So let's understand more about these states of matter. So the first state of matter is the solid state. Consider some solids like a pen or a book, a needle or a piece of wooden stick. If you try sketching the shape of these articles, we are able to understand that they have a definite shape and distinct boundaries. So the first property of the solids are that they have a definite shape and distinct boundaries. They also have fixed volumes and they are not compressible. Now why do solids have a definite shape and all? Let's see. In solids, the particles are packedly closed together. Here the force of attraction is very much strong, hence the particles couldn't move. So that is why the solids have a definite shape and it has a definite volume. And the solids, they can't flow as well. Do solids flow? No. Liquids and gases can flow, but solids cannot. So as these particles are tightly packed, solids can't easily be compressed as well. And because there are a lot of particles in a very small volume, solids are dense. That is, the density of solids are also very high. The solids, they have a tendency to maintain their shape when subjected to outside force. And solids, they may break under force, but they are still rigid. Rigid means it's not easy to bend or it's not flexible. Okay, so what all are the characteristics of solids? They have a definite shape, they have a distinct boundaries, fixed volumes, they are not compressible, they do not flow, they are rigid and they might break under force. Now let's consider some other articles. Say for example a rubber band. It changes its shape. Is it a solid? Yes, it is a solid. A rubber band changes the shape under force when we stretch, and it regains the same shape when the force is removed. So we can say that a rubber band has a fixed shape, and if excessive force is applied, it breaks as well, and it satisfies all of the properties of solid. Hence the rubber band is a solid. Now another article is the sugar or a salt. It appears to take the shape of a container. Are they solids? According to solids, it has a fixed shape. So is the sugar salt a solid? Yes, sugar and salt are solids. It's because the sugar and salt contains many tiny crystals, and each crystal it has a fixed shape. The shape of each individual crystal or a salt crystal remains fixed whether we take it in a hand or put it in a plate or a jar. It just appears to take the shape of the container as it is very small of size. Now another solid is sponge. We are able to compress a sponge. Then is it a solid? Yes, it is a solid. A sponge is able to compress because the sponge has minute holes in which the air is trapped. So when we press the sponge, the air is expelled out and hence we are able to compress this. So we can say that all these are solids too. The next state of matter is the liquid state. Now the properties of liquid is that they have no fixed shape but have a fixed volume. Now why is that? It's because in liquids the particles move freely. They're not closely packed like that of the solids and they have greater space between each other. And hence the force of attraction is less as compared to that of solids. And that is why they have no fixed shape. But they do have a fixed volume. Now the liquids they take up the shape of the container in which they are kept. Let's consider an activity. You take some liquids like water or cooking oil, arrange them in some containers of different shape and put a mark of 50 ml or 200 ml. Now measure that much ml of any liquid and transfer it into different containers one by one. Does the volume remain the same? Yes, if you notice that the volume remains the same. Does the shape of the liquid remain same? No, because the liquids take up the shape of the container. And when you pour the liquid from one container into the another, does it flow easily? Yes, the liquids flow easily and they change shape as well. Hence we can say that liquids are not rigid. And as they flow, they can also be called as fluid. Now both solids and liquids, they can diffuse into liquids. We have already seen the experiment where in the case of solids where potassium permanganate or the salt is mixed with water, it gets diluted easily. Similarly, when a blue or red ink was mixed with water, the whole beaker turned blue. So in both these cases, we understood that solid and liquids, they diffuse into liquids. So just like solids and liquids, the gases also diffuse into liquids. Say for example, the gases from the atmosphere. They diffuse and dissolve in water, especially the oxygen and carbon dioxide, which are essential for the survival. All living creatures, they need air to breathe for their survival. And the aquatic animals, they can breathe underwater due to the presence of dissolved oxygen in water. Hence we can say that the solids, liquids and gases, they can diffuse into liquid easily. But the rate of diffusion of liquid is higher than that of solids. This is mainly due to the fact that in liquid state the particles they move freely and they have a greater space between each other as compared to the particles in solid state. We've already seen, right? So the rate of diffusion is highest in the gases, then comes the liquid, and solids have the least rate of diffusion. Now what was diffusion? The definition of diffusion is that it is the net movement of anything from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration, or in simple words, it is the intermixing of one substance with another. Now the third state of matter is the gaseous state. The gases, they do not have a fixed shape. Say for example, if you try inflating or filling balloons of two different shapes and different volumes with equal amount of air, we can see that the air takes the shape of the balloon and it has different volumes as well. Hence we can say that the gases do not have a fixed volume. Now they have very low density and they can fill a container completely. Both solids and liquids, they cannot fill a container completely, but gases can, and they have very low density. Why is that? It is because in gases, the particles are very far away from each other, and the particles are free to flow easily from one place to another. Hence, the force of attraction is nil, almost nil, and they have high kinetic energy, and as a result, they keep on moving randomly. The gases, they are highly compressible as well as compared with solids and liquids. Let's understand this through a simple activity. Take 300 ml syringes and close their nostrils by rubber corks. Remove the pistons from all the syringes. Leave one syringe untouched, that is, it is filled with air. Fill the second with water and third with pieces of chalk. Insert the pistons back into the syringe and try to compress the content, pushing the piston in each syringe. We can see that the syringe containing air can be compressed easily as compared to that of chalk powder or water. Hence, we can say that the gases are highly compressible as compared to solid and liquids. The liquefied petroleum gas, the LPG cylinder, which is used for cooking, or the oxygen supplied to the hospitals through the cylinders, it is also compressed gas. The compressed natural gas, CNG, used as a fuel these days in vehicles, due to its high compressibility, large volumes of gas can be compressed into small cylinder and transported easily. So we saw the diffusion of solids and liquids and gases and liquids. Now let's see how the gases diffuses into other gases. Now, due to the high speed of particles and large spaces between them, the gases diffuses very fastly into other gases. Let's take some instances. How are we able to smell an incense stick or a perfume or some cooked food? Now, how does the smell reach us? The particles of the aroma of the food, it mixes with the particles of the air, spread from the kitchen and reach us even though we are far away. So that's how fastly these particles move. In gaseous state, these particles move randomly at a very high speed, and due to this random movement, the particles hit each other and also the walls of the container. And the pressure exerted by the gas is actually because of this force exerted by the gas particles per unit area on the walls of the container. What is matter? What matter is made up of? It is made up of small particles, the characteristic of these particles, and we saw the different states of matter. Now the next question that comes to our mind is, can matter change from one state to another? Can it change? Yes, matter can change its state. Say for example, water. Water exists in three states. We know, right? In the solid state, water is ice. In the liquid state, it is water itself. And in the gaseous state, it is water vapor. And we also have seen how water changes into water vapor, how water changes to ice or ice into water. So what happens inside the matter during this change of state? What happened to the particles of the matter during this change of states, and what causes this change of state? That is the first question. How does this change of state takes place? It is mainly due to the change in temperature or the change in pressure. So let's see more about these. So first let's see how the matter changes its state with the change in temperature. Let's take a simple activity. Take about 150 gram of ice in a beaker and suspend a laboratory thermometer such that the bulb of the thermometer comes in contact with the ice. Start heating the beaker in a slow flame. Note the temperature when the ice starts melting. And note the temperature also when the ice has completely converted into water. Okay, so here we are taking the observation from the conversion of solid to liquid state. Okay, so now the beaker contains water. Now put a glass rod in the beaker and heat it while stirring, and the water will start boiling. Now keep a note on the thermometer till most of the water has been vaporized. Here also we are recording the observation of the conversion of water, which is in liquid state, to gaseous state. So what do we understand from these two instances? We have already seen that when we increase the temperature of the solid, the kinetic energy of the particle increases. So when the kinetic energy increases, what happens to the particles? The particles would start vibrating with the greater speed. So the energy which is supplied by the heat, it overcomes the force of attraction between the particles. We know that in solids, the particles are closely packed. That is mainly due to the force of attraction between the particles. So when we supply heat, the energy, it overcomes this force of attraction. And what will the particles do? The particles would leave their fixed position and will start moving freely. So this state shows that it is becoming a liquid state. So a stage is reached when the solid melts and is converted to liquid. So the minimum temperature at which a solid melts to become a liquid at atmospheric pressure is called as melting point. In simple words, the minimum temperature at which a solid melts to liquid is termed as a melting point. We can also say that the melting point of a solid is an indication of the strength of the force of attraction between particles. Now the melting point of ice is 273.15 K. For convenience, we always round it and say that it is 273 K. In Celsius, it is 0 degrees Celsius. Now for your general information, to convert a temperature on the Celsius scale to a Kelvin scale, if you want to convert the 0 degrees Celsius to Kelvin, what should we do? We should add 273 to the given temperature. So if you add 273 with the 0, what is the answer? 273 K. Okay. Now if you want to do the vice versa, if you want to convert a Kelvin scale to Celsius scale, we have to subtract 273 from the given temperature. Now this process of melting, that is a change of a solid state into a liquid state, is also known as fusion. Now if you observe the experiment, we could see that when the ice melts, the temperature remains a constant. So where did this heat energy go? Let's see. So as we said, during the experiment of melting, the temperature of the system, it does not change after the melting point is reached. But after the ice melts, the temperature increases. That is, here we are supplying heat to this ice. Okay, and the ice, it starts changing into liquid. Now during this melting process, if you observe the thermometer, we could see that the temperature remains a constant. And when the ice completely converts to liquid, the temperature starts increasing. So in this process of melting, during the process of melting, what happens is that the temperature is a constant, even though we are applying a lot of heat. So where does the heat go? The heat is actually used up by the particles of the ice in order to overcome the force of attraction. In the last slide we saw, when we supply heat to a solid, what does it happen? The energy, it overcomes the force of attraction, and the particles, they move away from their fixed position and they start to move freely. So this heat is actually used up in changing the state by overcoming the force of attraction between the particles. So as this heat energy is absorbed by the ice without showing any rise in the temperature, it is considered that this heat is hidden in the contents of the beaker, and that is why this heat is termed as latent heat. Now the word latent means hidden. So we can say that the particles in water at 0 degrees Celsius, they have more energy as compared to the particles in ice at the same temperature. Now the amount of heat energy that is required to change 1 kilogram of solid into liquid at atmospheric pressure at its melting point is known as the latent heat of fusion. Or in simple words, we can say that the amount of heat required to change 1 kilogram of a substance at a temperature of its melting point from solid to liquid without changing its temperature is termed as latent heat of fusion. So now the beaker contains only water because the ice have completely melted. Okay, now when we supply heat energy to this water, what happens? The particles start moving even faster, because we already know when there is an increase in temperature, there is an increase in kinetic energy of the particles, and hence the particle starts vibrating or moving very fast. And at a certain temperature, a point is reached when the particles have enough energy to break free from the force of attraction of each other. As just like we saw in the last slide, when we apply heat to a solid, what happens? That energy, it overcomes the force of attraction between the particles, and the particles, they move away from their fixed position and they flow freely. Here also, when we apply heat to this water, the particles in the water, it gains energy to break free from the force of attraction of each other. And at a certain temperature, the liquid starts changing into gas. So the temperature at which A liquid starts boiling at atmospheric pressure is called as boiling point. The temperature at which a liquid boils and turns to vapor is termed as boiling point. Now a boiling point is like a bulk phenomenon because the particles from bulk of liquid, it gains enough energy to change into its vapor state. So for water, the temperature is 100 degrees Celsius. So if you want to convert 100 degree to Kelvin, what should we do? We should add 273 to this. So if we add, we will say that it has 373 K. That is, the temperature of water at boiling point is 373 K. And Kelvin is the SI unit of temperature. The particles in the stream, that is the water vapor, which has a temperature of 373 K, it have more energy than the water at the same temperature. This is because the particles in the steam, they have absorbed the extra energy in the form of latent heat of vaporization, just how we saw the latent heat of fusion. So the same takes place here as well. So we can define the latent heat of vaporization as the amount of heat required to change 1 kilogram of liquid into vapor at its boiling point. So from this we can conclude that the state of matter can be changed into another state by changing the temperature. We saw how substances change from solid to liquid, right, and from liquid to gas on the application of heat. But there are some substances that change directly from solid to gas and gas to solid without changing into liquid state. Let's see this through an activity. Take some camphor or ammonium chloride, crush it and put it in a china dish and put an inverted funnel over the china dish. Okay, and put a cotton plug on the stem of the funnel. Now heat slowly and observe. What can we see? We can see the ammonium chloride changing into gas, that is the vapors of ammonium chloride. So here there is a change of state from solid to gas. So this change of state directly from solid to gas without changing into liquid state is called as sublimation. The process of changing the state directly from solid to gas without changing into liquid is termed as sublimation. Another example is dry ice. This dry ice is actually solid carbon dioxide. At room temperature, it directly converts into carbon dioxide. Okay, so this is another example of sublimation. Now at the direct change of gas to solid without changing into liquid is called as deposition. Deposition is a process where there is a direct change from gas to solid without changing into liquid. One example is that during winters, extreme winters, it's especially in European countries and all, we could see the over the plants or the window plates, there is an accumulation of ice like this. Here what happens is that the water vapor, it directly converts to ice due to the decrease in temperature. Okay, so this process is termed as deposition. So now let's see how a matter changes from one state to another due to the change in pressure. So from the previous slides, we understood that the difference in various states of matter is due to the difference in the distance between the particles. In gases, the particles are loosely packed. So what will happen if we apply pressure and compress the gas in a cylinder? If we increase the pressure, the particles will come closer, and with the increase in pressure and if we reduce the temperature, we could liquefy the gas. Now let's take another example of solid carbon dioxide. It is stored under high pressure. Okay, so this solid carbon dioxide that we saw in the last slide, it actually gets converted directly into gaseous state. It changes into gas on the decrease of pressure without coming into the liquid state. We saw in the last slide in the process of sublimation where the solid carbon dioxide, it directly converts into carbon dioxide at room temperature. So this is mainly due to the decrease of pressure. And this is the reason why solid carbon dioxide is also called as dry ice. So if you reduce the pressure, some solids like solid carbon dioxide can turn into gas as well. Thus we can say that the pressure and temperature, it determines the state of a substance, whether it will be solid, liquid or gas. So this is the interconversion of the three states of matter. Now let's see what is evaporation. Now we know that the particles of the matter are always moving and they're never at rest. At a given temperature in any form of matter, let it be gas or liquid or solid, there are particles with different amount of kinetic energy. Now in the case of liquids, a small fraction of the particles at the surface, they having a higher kinetic energy, is able to break free from the forces of attraction of other particles and it gets converted to vapor. This phenomenon of the change of liquid into vapor at any temperature below its boiling point is called as evaporation. Evaporation is a process where the liquid gets converted into vapor at a temperature below its boiling point. Some of the real-time examples is that when water is left uncovered for a long period of time, we could see that the water gets reduced. That is mainly because the water changes into vapor. Here also, if we put wet clothes outside for a long time, we could see that the wet clothes dry up. This is also due to the evaporation of the water present in them. Now let's see what all are the factors affecting evaporation. The main factors are surface area, temperature, humidity and wind speed. So the rate of evaporation changes with respect to these factors. So let's see each of these factors briefly. The first one is surface area. The rate of evaporation increases with the increase in surface area. We know that evaporation is a surface phenomenon. Why do we term it like that? Because during evaporation, the particles with high kinetic energy, they evaporate into air from the surface of the liquid. That is why we call evaporation as a surface phenomenon. So if the surface area is increased, the rate of evaporation also increases. Here we can see with the increase in surface area, the number of particles at the surface of the liquid is much high as compared to this. Hence, the rate of evaporation here takes place quite fastly as compared to this. Similarly, while putting clothes for drying up, if we spread them out, it dries up quickly because here the evaporation takes place at a much faster rate. So we could conclude that the rate of evaporation increases with the increase in surface area. Now let's see how the rate of evaporation changes with temperature. The rate of evaporation, it increases with the increase in temperature. We know that with the increase in temperature, more number of particles at the surface gets enough kinetic energy to go into the vapor state. So the rate of evaporation increases with the increase in temperature. Now the rate of evaporation increases with the decrease in humidity. We know that when evaporation takes place, the water vapor is added to the atmosphere, whereas humidity is the amount of water vapor which is already present in the air. So the air around us, it cannot hold more than a definite amount of water vapor at a given temperature. So if the amount of water in the air is already high, the rate of evaporation decreases. Or in simple words, if humidity is high in the atmosphere, evaporation would be low. The rate of evaporation increases with the increase in wind speed. With the increase in wind speed, the particles of the water vapor, which are already filled with kinetic energy, they move away with the wind, decreasing the amount of water vapor on the surroundings. That's why we usually see that the clothes, they dry up faster on a windy day. So this is how the different factors affect evaporation. Now evaporation also causes cooling. Let's see how. In an open vessel, the liquid keeps on evaporating. So what happens during this process? The particles of the liquid, other than evaporating, it also absorbs the energy from the surrounding to regain or restore the energy which is lost during evaporation. The particles of the liquid, they absorb the energy from the surroundings to restore the energy that they have lost during evaporation. So this absorption of energy from the surrounding, it makes the surrounding cold. And that is why we say that evaporation causes cooling. Now let's understand this concept through some real-time examples. When we pour a nail polish remover into a hand, we feel cold. Why is that? It is because the particles of the acetone or the nail polish remover, they gain energy from our palm or the surroundings and it evaporate, causing the palm to feel cold. Similarly, during a hot day, you might have seen people sprinkling water on the roof or an open ground, causing the roof to cool. Why do they do that? It is because here also the large latent heat of vaporization of water helps to cool the hot surface. Now, what was this latent heat of vaporization? It was the amount of heat required to change 1 kilogram of liquid to vapor at its boiling point without changing its temperature. Or in simple words, we can say that when here the water on the roof, it gets converted into water vapor. And during this evaporation, what happens? The energy is used from the surroundings in order to restore the lost energy during evaporation, making the roof to cool. Similarly, people wear cotton clothes during summer. Why do they do that? We know that during summer, we sweat a lot, right? We perspire. Why do we do that? Because it is a mechanism of our body which keeps us cool. We know that during evaporation, the particles at the surface of the liquid gain energy from the surroundings or the body surface and change it into vapor. So this heat energy is equal to the latent heat of vaporization, which is absorbed from the body, leaving the body cool. So cotton being a good absorber of water, it helps in absorbing the sweat and exposes it into atmosphere for easy evaporation. Now you might also have seen that water droplets on the outer surface of the gas containing ice cold water. Why do we see that? It is because the water vapor present in the air on coming in contact with the cold glass of water, it loses its energy and it gets converted into liquid state, which we see as water droplets. So from all this we can understand that evaporation causes cooling. So we already know there are 3 states of matter. Now other than this, there are 2 more states of matter. One is plasma and Bose-Einstein condensate. So now let's see the 4th state of matter, which is plasma. Just a brief introduction of what plasma is. The plasma is a state of matter that consists of super energetic and super excited particles. These particles are in the form of ionized gas. That is, it consists of ions, positive and negative ions. Now the fluorescent tubes or the neon sign bulbs, they consist of plasma. You might have seen such types of bulbs and tubes, right? These actually consist of plasma. Now inside a neon bulb, there is neon gas, and inside a fluorescent tube, there is a helium or some other gas. Now this gas, it gets ionized. That is, the gas, it gets charged when electrical energy flows through it. This charging up, it creates a plasma to glow inside this neon bulb or inside this tube. So this is a fluorescent tube. So the plasma, it glows with a special color depending on the nature of the gas. The sun, the stars, they all glow because of the presence of plasma in them. And the plasma is created in stars because of very high temperature. Now let's see the 5th state of matter, which is Bose-Einstein condensate. In 1920, the Indian physicist Satyendra Nath Bose has done some calculations on the 5th state of matter. Building on S.N. Bose calculation, Albert Einstein, he predicted a new state of matter, which is the Bose-Einstein condensate. In 2001, Eric A. Corwell, Wolfgang Ketterle and Carl A. Weyman of USA received the Nobel Prize in Physics for achieving this Bose-Einstein condensation. So this BEC is formed by cooling a gas of extremely low density, about 100,000 the density of normal air, to super low temperatures. This is just for information. If you want to know more about this, just message me in the comment section. I'll give you a separate lecture for both this plasma and Bose-Einstein condensate. So let's take a quick summary of what all we have studied in this chapter. First, we saw what is matter. We saw that matter is made up of small particles. The matter around us exists in 3 states: solid, liquid and gas. And there is a force of attraction between these particles, and that force of attraction is maximum in solids, intermediate in liquids and minimum in gas. And we also saw the characteristics of these particles. One such characteristic was that these particles have spaces in between them, and the kinetic energy of these particles are minimum in the case of solids, intermediate in liquids and maximum in gas. The arrangement of particles is most ordered in the case of solids because they are tightly packed. In the case of liquids, the particles can slip or slide over each other, whereas in the case of gases, the particles just move about randomly. Then we also saw that the states of matter are interconvertible, that is, they change from one state to another, and the state of matter can be changed by either changing the temperature or pressure. Then we saw a large number of processes like sublimation. It is a change of solid state directly to gaseous state without going through liquid state. Deposition, it is a change of gaseous state directly to solid state without going through liquid state. Then we saw boiling, which is a bulk phenomenon. The particles from a bulk or a whole of the liquid changes into vapor state. We saw about evaporation, which is a surface phenomenon. The particles from the surface of the liquid gain enough energy to overcome the forces of attraction and it changes into vapor state. That is what was called as evaporation. Then we saw the rate of evaporation changes with respect to certain factors like surface area, temperature, humidity, and wind speed. We saw that evaporation also causes cooling. Then we discussed about the latent heat of vaporization, latent heat of fusion. The latent heat of vaporization is the heat energy required to change 1 kilogram of liquid into gas at its atmospheric pressure at its boiling point. The latent heat of fusion is the amount of heat energy required to change 1 kilogram of solid into liquid at its melting point. If you have any doubt concerning any of the topics or any of the terms, message me in the comment section. I'll be happy to help. So that's all for chapter 1, Matter in Our Surroundings. Tune in soon for the next session. Till then, take care, stay safe, and may God bless you all. Thank you.